I knew something was off long before I admitted it to myself, but that night made it impossible to ignore. She laughed at her phone in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. Not a polite chuckle, not the quiet exhale she'd been giving me lately when I tried too hard to be funny, but a real laugh, sharp, bright, the kind that used to fill our apartment when we first moved in together. I was sitting across from her on the couch, half watching some show we had both stopped caring about 3 episodes ago. The room smelled like leftover takeout, and the candle she'd lit out of habit rather than intention. I remember pausing, really listening to that laugh, like it belonged to someone else. "What's so funny?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She didn't look up right away. Her thumbs moved quickly over the screen, like she was finishing something before acknowledging me. Then she glanced up, smiled briefly, and said, "Just a meme," before turning the phone face down on her thigh. That should have been nothing. It used to be nothing. We used to show each other everything: stupid videos, random posts, things that barely deserved a second glance. Half our relationship, in the beginning, felt like it was built on shared laughter over things that didn't matter. But she didn't show me this one. I nodded, like it didn't bother me. "Must be a good one." "Yeah," she said, already looking back at the TV. And that was it. The moment passed. The show continued. But something stayed behind, like a splinter I couldn't quite see but definitely felt. It wasn't just that she didn't show me the meme. It was how quickly she shut the door on it, how casually she redirected herself away from me. Like whatever had made her laugh so freely wasn't something I was invited into anymore. I didn't push. That was my first mistake, or maybe my instinct to preserve what little ease we still had left. I told myself I was overthinking it. People change. Relationships settle. Not every laugh has to be shared. But that was the first time I felt it clearly, like a quiet realization forming into words I wasn't ready to say out loud. I wasn't the person she shared her joy with anymore. And once you notice something like that, you start noticing everything else. Like how she started taking her phone with her everywhere. Not in an obvious, secretive way at first. Just small things, flipping it over when I walked into the room, replying to messages a little too quickly, and then putting it down like it hadn't mattered. Or how conversations between us became efficient, functional. We talked about groceries, bills, schedules. We stopped talking about the random thoughts that used to fill the space between us. I'd start a story about something that happened at work, and she'd nod, but her attention felt like it was hovering somewhere just outside the room. At night, she'd scroll while lying next to me, the light from her screen casting a faint glow across her face. Sometimes she'd smile at something, a small private reaction, and I'd feel that same quiet distance stretch a little wider. I tried to bridge it at first. "Remember that video we saw last year? The one with the dog and the she'd say, not really listening. Or I'd send her something during the day, something that reminded me of us, and she'd respond hours later with a simple LOL or a heart reaction. It wasn't cold exactly. That would have been easier to confront. It was just less effort, less presence, less of her. I told myself she was stressed. Work had been intense for her lately. New responsibilities, longer hours, the kind of pressure that drains you in ways you don't always recognize. I wanted to be understanding. I wanted to be the kind of partner who didn't make everything about himself. So I gave her space. But space, I started to realize, can quietly turn into distance if no one is trying to close it. One night, maybe a week after the meme incident, we were lying in bed. She was on her side, facing away from me, her phone still in her hand. I could see the reflection of the screen in the mirror across the room. She was smiling again. It wasn't a big smile, just a soft one, the kind that lingers. Her fingers paused over the screen like she was rereading something. I almost asked then. The question sat right there in my chest, heavy and insistent. "Who are you talking to?" But I didn't say it. Instead, I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet tap of her fingers and the faint rhythm of her breathing. I told myself that trust meant not asking questions you weren't ready to hear the answers to. Looking back now, I think I already knew something had shifted. I just didn't know how far it had gone. If there's a moment where things actually start to fall apart, it's not loud. It doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It creeps in quietly, like something rotting behind the walls. For me, it was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. I got home earlier than usual because a meeting got canceled. I remember feeling oddly relieved, like I'd stolen time back from a week that already felt too heavy. I even picked up her favorite dessert on the way home, a small gesture from a version of us that still existed in my head. When I opened the door, the apartment was quiet. That wasn't unusual. She often got home later than me. But something about the silence felt too complete. No music, no TV, just stillness. I set my keys down, dropped my bag, and walked into the kitchen. The counter was clean, almost deliberately so. Her morning mug was gone, the sink empty. It looked like no one had been there. I checked my phone. No messages. I told myself not to read into it. I had just started making coffee when I heard the door unlock. "Hey," I called out. She stepped in and paused when she saw me. It was brief, but I noticed. "Oh, you're home early." "Yeah, thought I'd surprise you." She smiled, but it felt thin. "That's nice. How was your day?" "Busy," she said quickly, slipping off her shoes. She walked past me into the bedroom, taking her bag with her. The conversation ended there. I stood in the kitchen a moment longer than necessary. Busy. That word had become her shield. When she came back, she'd changed into something comfortable, but her energy didn't match it. She felt distracted, like part of her was somewhere else. "I got you that dessert you like," I said. She glanced at it. "You didn't have to." "I know. Thanks," she added after a second. We ate at the table, but it didn't feel shared. She scrolled between bites. I tried to talk, about work, about a movie, about anything, but everything I said landed flat. Then her phone buzzed. Her expression shifted immediately. Subtle, but there. She picked it up. I watched her eyes move, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Who is it?" I asked. A small pause. "Work. You said you were done." "I am. Just tying things up." I nodded, even though it didn't feel right. We finished eating in silence. Later, she said she was going to shower. She left her phone on the couch. That alone felt unusual. I didn't touch it. Not because I trusted her completely. I didn't trust what I might do if I saw something I couldn't undo. So I sat there, staring at the dark screen. Then it lit up. A notification. Just a name. No message. I didn't recognize it. That was enough. My chest tightened. My mind filled in gaps I hadn't wanted to face. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. The water was still running. I could have picked it up. I didn't. I stayed still, hands pressed together, trying to convince myself that not knowing was better. But something had already changed. Because now it wasn't just a feeling. Now it had a shape. A name. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because anything happened, but because nothing did. She came back from the shower, hair damp, skin warm, moving through the room like everything was normal. She picked up her phone without hesitation, like she knew exactly where she had left it, like it hadn't sat there between us carrying a weight she couldn't see. I watched her from the bed, pretending to scroll through my own screen. She checked the notification. I saw it in the reflection of the wardrobe mirror. Just a quick glance, then a reply. Her face didn't change much this time. Whatever had made her smile earlier was gone, replaced by something more controlled. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, not looking up. That was it. We turned off the lights not long after. She lay on her side again, facing away from me. The distance between us wasn't big, just a few inches of mattress, but it felt deliberate. I lay there, staring into the dark, listening to her breathing. At some point, I realized I was trying to match it. Like if I could sync up with her, we'd still be connected somehow. It didn't work. The next morning felt almost painfully normal. She made coffee. I got dressed for work. We moved around each other in that quiet, efficient way we'd fallen into. There was no tension on the surface, nothing you could point to and say this is the problem. And maybe that was the problem. "Do you want me to pick up groceries later?" I asked as I put on my shoes. "Yeah, that would be great," she said. "We're out of a lot of stuff." She didn't notice the way I said it. "Yeah," she said, distracted, already looking at her phone again. I stood there for a second longer than necessary. "Okay," I said finally. At work, I couldn't focus. I kept replaying small things in my head. The laugh, the name on the screen, the way she paused before answering simple questions. None of it was proof of anything, not really. But together, it built something harder to ignore. Around midday, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I checked her social media. Not in a deep, obsessive way at first. Just a quick look. Her profiles were mostly the same. Old photos of us still there. Comments from friends. Nothing obvious. But then I noticed something small. There were fewer posts about us. Not gone, just less. The last picture of the two of us was from almost 3 months ago. That felt wrong. We used to post together all the time. Not excessively, but enough that it marked our life as something shared. Now it looked like a timeline slowly being edited. I clicked through her tagged photos. Scrolled through comments. That's when I saw it. A name. The same one from the notification. Not in a message, not directly. Just a like. Then another. Then a comment on one of her photos from a couple of weeks ago. Something simple. Nothing inappropriate. But familiar. Familiar in a way that suggested they had a rhythm I wasn't part of. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was still nothing concrete. No obvious betrayal. Just patterns. And yet, I felt something settle in my chest, heavy and quiet. When I got home that evening, she was already there. She was on the couch again, phone in hand. For a moment, I just stood in the doorway, watching her. Waiting. She smiled at something on the screen. Not as big as before, but real. "Hey," I said. She looked up. "Hey." I walked in slowly, set my bag down. "How was your day?" "Same as usual," she said. "Yours?" "Fine." I sat down next to her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "What are you looking at?" I asked. This time, she didn't hesitate as long. "Just stuff," she said, turning the screen slightly away. "Just stuff." I nodded. And for the first time, I didn't try to keep things light. "Who's Daniel?" The name sat between us the second I said it. Her body went still. Not dramatically, just enough. She didn't look at me right away. "Why?" she asked. "I saw the notification yesterday," I said. My voice was calm, but it didn't feel like mine. "And his name keeps popping up." Now she looked at me. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was careful. "He's just someone from work." Just someone. The same words she'd used for everything else. "Someone from work who texts you at night?" I asked. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" A pause. "I don't know why you're making this into something," she said quietly. I almost laughed. Because the truth was, I wasn't making it into something. I was finally saying it out loud. "I'm not making it into something," I said. "I'm asking you what it is." She looked away first. That, more than anything, hit me harder than if she'd snapped or gotten defensive. It was subtle, but it told me she was choosing her words carefully. "It's just work," she repeated. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. "You keep saying that," I said, "but it doesn't feel like just work." Her jaw tightened slightly. "Not everything has to feel like something suspicious." I didn't say suspicious. You didn't have to. There it was. A shift. Not loud, not explosive, but enough to change the air between us. I leaned back slightly, creating a small space where there hadn't been one before. "Okay," I said. "Then help me understand." She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "He's on my team. We've been working on the same project for weeks." "That's it." "And the late messages?" "We have deadlines." "At night?" "Yes, sometimes at night." Her answers came quickly now, smoother. Like she had settled into a version of the story she could stay inside. I watched her as she spoke. The way her eyes held mine just a little too steadily. The way her tone stayed controlled. "Then why didn't you just say that?" I asked. "I did." "No," I said. "You said just work." "That's not the same thing." She sighed, louder this time. "I didn't think I needed to explain every detail of my day." "That's not what I'm asking for." "Then what are you asking for?" The question hung there, heavier than anything she'd said before. I opened my mouth, then hesitated. Because the honest answer wasn't simple. "I'm asking why it feels like you're somewhere else all the time," I said finally. "Like I'm talking to you, but you're not really here." Her expression softened for a moment. Not with guilt, but something closer to fatigue. "I've just been stressed," she said. "Work has been a lot." "You've been saying that for months." "Because it's been months," she replied, a hint of irritation slipping through. We sat in silence again. I could feel the conversation slipping into familiar territory, the kind where nothing actually gets resolved, where explanations circle back on themselves until you're too tired to keep pushing. But I wasn't ready to let it go this time. "Did something change?" I asked quietly. She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "With us." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "No," she said. "It was too quick." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Another lie. Or maybe not a lie, but not the truth either. There's a difference. And when you've been with someone long enough, you can hear it. I looked down at my hands, then back at her. "Because it feels like something did," I said. "And I don't know what it is, and you won't tell me. And now there's this guy." "He's not this guy," she said, sharper now. "He's my coworker." "Then why does it feel like more than that?" Because you're looking for something to be wrong, she said. That stung more than I expected. I wasn't, I said. Not until recently. And now you are. Because something changed. No, she said firmly. You just noticed things you didn't before. I let out a small, humorless breath. Those aren't the same thing. She didn't respond. The silence stretched again, heavier this time. Finally, she stood up. I don't want to fight about this, she said. I'm not trying to fight. It feels like you are. I looked up at her. I'm trying to understand what's happening to us. She hesitated, like she might say something more. Then she didn't. I'm tired, she said instead. I'm going to lie down. And just like that, she walked away. I stayed on the couch, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting. The conversation hadn't exploded. There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations. But it felt worse somehow, because nothing had been resolved. She hadn't reassured me. Not really. And I hadn't pushed hard enough to break through whatever wall she'd put up. I sat there for a long time, replaying everything. Her words, her pauses, the way she said his name without saying it. And underneath all of it, a quiet realization started to take shape. This wasn't just about him. It would have been easier if it was. If there had been a clear villain, a clear line crossed, something I could point to and say this is where it broke. But this felt slower than that. Like something between us had been fading for a while, and I had only just turned around to notice how dim it had become. And maybe he wasn't the cause. Maybe he was just where the light had gone. After that conversation, things didn't explode. They settled. And somehow, that was worse. We didn't bring it up again the next day, or the day after that. It was like we had both silently agreed to step around it. Like avoiding a crack in the floor you're not sure can hold your weight. On the surface, everything looked fine. We still shared meals. Still said good morning and good night. Still existed in the same space without open hostility. But something underneath had shifted into something colder. She became more careful. Not distant in the obvious way I had expected, but controlled. Measured. Like she had recalibrated how much of herself she let me see. Her phone was still always nearby, but now she was more subtle about it. Angling the screen away without making it obvious. Replying less when I was around, more when I wasn't. It wasn't enough to accuse her of anything, but it was enough to make me feel like I was being managed. I tried, at first, to meet her halfway. I asked about her day. I suggested we go out, do something different, break whatever pattern we had fallen into. Sometimes she agreed, and for a few hours, things almost felt normal again. Almost. We'd sit across from each other at a restaurant, and she'd laugh at something I said, but it felt slightly delayed, like she was catching up rather than sharing the moment with me. Her eyes would drift to her phone whenever it buzzed, even if she didn't pick it up. And every time that happened, I felt that same quiet distance stretch a little wider. One night, about 2 weeks after I first asked about him, I came home later than usual. I had stayed at work longer on purpose. Part of me didn't want to be there, in that apartment where everything felt just slightly off. Part of me wanted to see if anything changed when I wasn't around. When I walked in, the lights were dim. She was in the living room, sitting on the floor this time, back against the couch. Her phone was in her hand, of course. She didn't hear me come in right away. And then I heard it. That laugh again. Not just a smile, not a quiet reaction. A real laugh. The kind I hadn't heard from her in months. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was suspicious, but because it was familiar. That was her. The version of her I had been missing. And it wasn't happening with me. I stood there longer than I should have, just watching her. There was something open about her in that moment. Relaxed. Unfiltered. Like she wasn't carrying whatever weight she seemed to have around me. Then she noticed me. The laugh cut off almost instantly. "Oh," she said, straightening slightly. "I didn't hear you." "Yeah," I replied. "I noticed." The words came out more pointed than I intended. She looked at me for a second, then glanced at her phone before locking it. "What's so funny?" I asked. I already knew what she was going to say. "Just something stupid," she said. "Not even a meme this time. Just something." I nodded slowly, stepping further into the room. "You laugh a lot at those stupid things," I said. She frowned slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I haven't heard you laugh like that with me in a while." There it was. Finally said out loud. She looked away, her expression tightening. "That's not fair," she said. "Why not?" "Because you're turning something small into something bigger." I felt a familiar frustration rise, but this time I didn't push it down. "It's not small to me," I said. "It feels like you're more there with whatever's on your phone than you are with me." She let out a quiet breath, like she was trying not to get irritated. You're overthinking this. Am I? Yes. I shook my head slightly. Then tell me I'm wrong. I said. Tell me you feel the same way about us that you used to. She didn't answer. Not right away. And in that pause, I felt something in my chest sink. Because silence can be louder than anything else. I care about you, she said finally. It wasn't the answer I asked for. I didn't ask if you care about me, I said. Then what do you want me to say? The truth. Her eyes met mine again. For a second, I thought she might actually give it to me. But then she looked down. I don't know what you want from me, she said quietly. And that was when it really hit me. Not that she was hiding something, but that whatever we had, she wasn't fighting for it the same way I was. After that, I stopped asking. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It wasn't a decision I made out loud, but something that happened quietly, like everything else between us. I just pulled back. If she said she was busy, I didn't question it. If her phone lit up and her expression shifted, I pretended not to notice. I stopped trying to read between the lines because every line I read only led me somewhere I didn't want to go. And for a while, things got easier. On the surface, at least. We argued less. The tension faded into something softer, something more manageable. We became polite with each other. Careful. Strangers don't fight as much as people in love do. I started staying out later more often. Sometimes it was work, sometimes it wasn't. I told myself I just needed space, but the truth was, I didn't want to sit across from her and feel that quiet absence anymore. When I was home, we coexisted. We watched things without really watching them. Ate meals without really talking. Slept in the same bed without touching. I noticed that she didn't reach for me anymore. Not in the small ways. No hand brushing mine in passing. No absent-minded leaning against me while we stood in the kitchen. Even when we sat close, there was always just enough space to remind me it was intentional. I tried once. I put my hand over hers while we were sitting on the couch. It used to be automatic, something neither of us had to think about. This time, she tensed for just a second before relaxing again. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold my hand either. It just stayed there, like something placed instead of shared. I let go first. That night, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't just losing her. I had already lost the version of us that mattered. A few days later, something happened that forced everything into focus. It was a Saturday. We had planned, weeks ago, to spend the day together. Nothing big. Just go out, maybe walk around the city, get food somewhere, be normal. I woke up before her and lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling. I tried to remember the last time I had actually looked forward to spending a full day with her without that underlying tension. I couldn't. When she woke up, she seemed distant. Not cold, just not present. Still want to go out today? I asked. She hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. I might need to work a bit, she said. There's something I didn't finish. Of course. Today? I asked. It won't take long. I nodded, even though something inside me sank. Okay. She got up, grabbed her phone almost immediately, and left the bedroom. I stayed in bed, staring at the empty space she had just left behind. An hour passed. Then two. She was in the living room the whole time. I could hear her moving around occasionally, but mostly silence. At some point, I got up and walked out. She was sitting on the couch, laptop open, phone in her hand. Not typing, just looking at the screen. Still working? I asked. She glanced up. Yeah. Her laptop screen was dim. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went to the kitchen, poured myself coffee I didn't really want, and stood there pretending it mattered. Around noon, she stood up. I'm going to step out for a bit, she said. That caught me off guard. For work? Yeah, she replied too quickly. Just need to meet someone about something. Someone? Who? She paused. A coworker. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest again. Daniel? I asked. There it was. That hesitation. That fraction of a second where the truth existed before it was covered. Yeah. I looked at her. Really looked at her. On a Saturday? I said. It's not a big deal, she replied. We just need to go over something in person. I nodded slowly. Right. She grabbed her jacket, her bag, her phone. I won't be long, she said. And then she left. I stood there in the quiet apartment, listening to the door close. Something about the way she said it, casual, almost dismissive, made everything feel suddenly very clear. Not because I had proof, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't follow her. For a few minutes after the door closed, I actually just stood there, in the middle of the kitchen, like my body hadn't caught up with what had just happened. The coffee in my hand had gone cold, but I didn't remember pouring it. There's a version of this story where I grab my jacket, go after her, see everything for myself, catch them in something undeniable, get the kind of proof that makes things clean, final. But real life doesn't always give you that. And the truth is, I didn't need to see it. I had already been watching it happen, slowly, over weeks. The distance, the way she laughed at things that weren't me, the way her attention shifted, piece by piece, somewhere I couldn't follow. This was just the first time she didn't try to make it look like anything else. Still, I moved. Not toward the door. Back to the living room. I sat down on the couch, in the exact spot she had been sitting earlier. Her laptop was still there, slightly open. The screen had gone dark. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without really deciding to, I opened it. No password. She'd never felt the need to hide that from me before. For a second, I almost laughed at the irony. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I think I just wanted something, anything, that would either confirm I was right or prove I had been imagining it all. Her email was open. Work stuff. Threads I didn't understand. Documents, deadlines, things that looked exactly like what she had been telling me. For a moment, I felt stupid. Like maybe this really was just work. Maybe I had taken a handful of small things and built them into something bigger than they were. Then I saw his name. Not hidden, not secret, just there. A conversation thread. I clicked it before I could think about whether I should. The messages weren't explicit. That would have been easier to process. They were familiar. Jokes. Small complaints about work. Little comments that didn't mean much on their own. But there was a tone to them. A rhythm. The kind you build with someone over time. I scrolled up. Weeks of this. Maybe longer. There was one message that stopped me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so simple. Today was actually fun. That's all it said. Her reply came a minute later. Yeah, I needed that. I sat there, staring at those 2 lines longer than I should have. Because I couldn't remember the last time she had said something like that to me. Not about us. Not about anything we did together. I kept scrolling. There were gaps. Conversations that clearly continued somewhere else. References to things I hadn't seen. Inside jokes I didn't understand. It wasn't just that she was talking to him. It was that she was sharing parts of herself with him that she no longer shared with me. And suddenly, everything made sense. The laughter. The distance. The way she looked at her phone like it held something more interesting than the life we had built together. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel that surge of anger I always thought would come in a moment like this. Just clarity. When she came back, it was late afternoon. I was still on the couch, in the same spot. She walked in, saw me there, and paused. Hey, she said, like nothing had happened. Hey. She took off her jacket, set her bag down. Her movements were normal. Practiced. How was it? I asked. Fine, she said. We got a lot done. I nodded. There was a moment where neither of us spoke. Then I asked, did you have fun? That caught her off guard. What? Today, I said. Was it fun? She looked at me carefully now. I mean, it was work. I held her gaze. Right. She frowned slightly. Why are you asking like that? I could have told her then. About the messages. About what I saw. I could have forced the truth out into the open. But as I looked at her, I realized something that hurt more than anything else had so far. It wouldn't change anything. Because the truth was already there. Not in what she said, but in what she didn't. I don't think you're in this anymore, I said quietly. Her expression shifted. Not shocked. Not even defensive. Just tired. That's not fair, she said, almost automatically. It was the same words she had used before. But they didn't carry the same weight anymore. Maybe not, I replied. But it feels true. She didn't argue this time. And that was the answer I had been avoiding. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled because everything that matters is already understood. I thought about that night. The laugh. The way she had said just a meme and turned away. I had told myself it was small, that it didn't mean anything. But it did. Because that was the moment I stopped being the person she shared her joy with. And once that changes, everything else follows.